Welcome back to another episode of Coup Save America. My name is Sean Sainhart. I'm your host for the next 2 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, it should be evident to those who have followed the show that we often delve into the challenges plaguing our nation. And time and again, it seems that our discussions always circle back to the pervasive divide between the affluent and the impoverished. The stark reality of the haves overshadowing the have-nots. But amidst these discussions, a crucial question often emerges. What actions can we, as individuals, as citizens of this country, take to address this deeply ingrained issue? This question echoed in 2018, when citizens from 40 states united under the banner of the Poor People's Campaign. Today, instead of my usual monologue, I wish to shed light on this movement and implore all of you to heed its call, to stand alongside your fellow citizens and to actively strive towards a more equitable society. Let me outline the 5 guiding principles of the Poor People's Campaign. First, we demand that the 140 million poor and low-income individuals in our nation, regardless of race, creed, color, sexuality, or origin, no longer be sidelined from our political and social discourse. Second, we rise not as partisans, but as a moral coalition dedicated to empowering voices, fostering activism, and amplifying voter engagement. Our silence is just simply no longer an option. Third, we seek to rewrite the moral narrative, putting an end to the systemic injustices of racism, poverty, environmental degradation, militarism, and the distorted veneer of religious nationalism. Speaking of which, next week, we're going to be doing a special episode on Thursday, specifically talking about religious nationalism and religious extremism. So tune in. That will be on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Go ahead and check our social media for information on that episode. Fourthly, we challenge the fallacy of scarcity in a land of plenty. And finally, we endeavor to uplift the voices and stories of impoverished Americans and their allies, offering a new vision rooted in love, justice, and truth. A vision where poverty is not inevitable and change is within reach. If you're eager to learn more about the Poor People's Campaign, and I know that you are, and learn more about its advocacy for a third Reconstruction, I urge you to visit the website poorpeoplescampaign.org. That's poorpeoplescampaign.org. And there you will find resources on how to join your local chapter and contribute to the fight against systemic poverty in America. Currently, the Poor People's Campaign is embarking on 40 weeks of extensive voter mobilization nationwide. And on March 2nd of this year, they orchestrated a coordinated day of action across 31 state capitals, a mass moral march of poor and low-wage workers, converging on state assemblies demanding to be heard. So let us not merely discuss change, but actively pursue it. Let us join hands in solidarity, for in unity lies the power to transform our nation for the better. The team from Coup Save America, myself included, joined the Day of Activism in our state capital here in Olympia, Washington. And despite the rain and intermittent hailstorms, brave citizens gathered to march and raise their voices against poverty. Our remarkable executive producer, Mackenzie Fritsch, whom I deeply love, admire, and respect, crafted a compelling 7-minute video montage capturing the essence of the event. We will now showcase this footage, allowing you to witness the strength of collective action for change. While those listening may miss the visuals, they can still immerse themselves in the music and impassioned speeches. So, friends, without further ado, let us delve into the mass poor people's and low-wage workers' moral march. And let's cue the video right now.
Oh, somebody is hurting my people, and it's gone on for too long, and we won't be silent anymore. No, we won't be, and we won't be silent anymore. One more time now, and we won't be silent anymore.
Forward together. Fight poverty.
Not the poor!
Fight poverty.
Not the poor!
Fight poverty.
Lost my slide.
Forward together.
Today we will be talking about facts, but we are also talking about the lived realities of what poor people are going through in Washington State. And we are here on these stairs because this is where legislation is made. And this is the seat of power. And we want them to know that we are not an insurrection of hate and destruction, but we are a resurrection of power and purpose. Olympia is not symbolic. We could have met anywhere. We could have met in the tri-state area. We could have cities area. We could have met at Walla Walla or Spokane. But we met right here because this is where the power lies. And this is the policy hub where decisions are made. And we're just going to keep on going. I hope you're not getting beat up. Good God Almighty. And see, state assemblies and state legislatures and governors make the decisions that impact the poor and low-wage people. They may not be poor themselves, but the decisions they make impact the poor. And these decisions often do not consider the lived realities of the poor while impacting them the most in terms of health care, public education, housing, reproductive rights, voting rights. And we are challenging extremism in state government. And we are challenging poverty and low wages. $16 may seem like a lot until the rent is due. So we are challenging extremism in all state governments, and we are saying that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death, and 800 people are dying every day in this country, and it's immoral. In the scriptures, it says that there is no need for the poor to be among us. Poverty and low wages are bad political choices. It is not due to bad decisions as people would have you believe. But we can no longer be disengaged from the political process. If poor and low-wage people are invited and given space and equal opportunity to speak and to vote at the same rate as others, every calculation that is coming will shift. If Voting Rights Act is restored, come on somebody. If they would stop going back to the poll taxes and the things that they did to turn this thing around. Friends, unity is dangerous. Come on, friends. Ask Washington, D.C. that don't want children who are black and brown to even be together. Unity is dangerous, and becoming a moral force is threatening to the status quo. Reverend Dr. King said at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, the great fear of greedy aristocracy in the nation was for the masses of Negro and poor whites to come together and to form a voting bloc that could change the economic architecture of the nation. Today, friends, it's not simply black and white folks, but it's black, brown, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, and indigenous people, and people of every distinction who now represent more than 80 million voters and over 20 million who have not yet voted. Come on, that's power. That's why we marched here today. That's why we hold our signs. That is why we rally here today to tell this legislature that we are a new, unsettling force. For power, we are disruptors. And we're not simply here to tear up anything. See, there's not one window broken. Somebody say amen. We're not here to just disrupt and upset things, but we come with demands that tell us that we want to bring about liberation for those who are most vulnerable among us. We dare are to be a voice of freedom in the wilderness. Why we are here knowing that we have an interconnectedness in all of our injustice, and simply because we are here talking about the poor, we are connected to people all over the world, those who are afraid, those who are dying by genocide, those who are all over this world. We stand together as a people who are moral, saying that enough is enough. We must wake the sleeping giant. It's no more time for us to be quiet. We must wake the sleeping giant so that we may become a country that is healed and unified. And so we're not stuck looking at what color our hat is or what color or metallic our shoe is, but that we're all one people, not left or right, but right or wrong.
And I don't know if you heard in that clip, but I somehow lost my protest sign. I had it in my hand, was walking down the street, and next thing I know, it was gone. So I have no idea what happened to that sign. If anyone happens to find it, let me know. Back to our show. Today, we welcome a true visionary to our show, none other than Benjamin Davidson, affectionately known as the Dream Wizard. With over 2 decades of experience in the field of mental health and dream analysis, Benjamin is not only a seasoned psychological professional, but also a dedicated scholar of dream research history, boasting numerous published works on the subject. So in this captivating episode today, Benjamin will guide us through the enchanting realm of dreams, showcasing their profound significance as a tool for self-discovery and problem-solving. Leveraging his rich background in dream analysis, Benjamin will unveil the intricate tapestry of connections between our dreams and our waking realities, offering insights that are both enlightening, transformative, and I'm sure entertaining. And who better to unveil the treasures of Benjamin's expertise than Benjamin himself? Here is a snippet from his podcast YouTube channel.
Benjamin the Dream Wizard wants to help you pierce the veil of night and shine the light of understanding upon the mystery of dreams. Every episode of his Dreamscapes program features real dreamers gifted with rare insight into their nocturnal visions. New Dreamscapes episodes appear every week on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and other video hosting platforms, as well as free audiobooks exploring the psychological principles which inform our dream experience, and much, much more. To join the wizard as a guest, reach out across more than a dozen social media platforms and through the contact page at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, where you will also find the wizard's growing catalog of historical dream literature available on Amazon, documenting the wisdom and wonder of exploration into the world of dreams over the past 2,000 years. That's Benjamin the Dream Wizard on YouTube and at benjaminthedreamwizard.com.
So if you happen to be asleep right now, wake the hell up, because Benjamin, the Dream Wizard Davidson, is joining us right now. Benjamin, thank you for joining the show.
Sean, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. So I have to ask you, how did you become interested in dream analysis, and what drew you to pursue it as a professional career?
Yeah, well, that takes me all the way back to when I was in college, 20 plus years ago. I had a history and systems of psychology class, and the teacher said, we're going to, here we are at the age of Freud and Jung and their contributions to the science of psychology. And the assignment was go home and talk to your friends, talk to your family, or use one of your own dreams and do one dream as a Freudian analysis and one dream as a Jungian analysis, showing me you understand the difference in the concepts. I did those with 2 of my own dreams, and came back, and the teacher was impressed. He's like, A level work. And I thought at that time, maybe I got a little bit of a knack for this, he was, so that really kind of opened my mind to the possibility that not only is this stuff real, but it can be of real benefit. And maybe I was someone who could practice that, professionally. Right. But it took me then, until just a few years ago to start the YouTube channel and start publishing the books and whatnot. So yeah, I had a long road to get there.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about dreams. First, what is the purpose of dreams in general? Why do we have them?
Yeah, well, the way I characterize it is that the heart beats, the lungs breathe, and the brain thinks. And it does that whether we are asleep or awake. It doesn't stop until the day we die. So my concept of what I believe dreams are is closer to what our actual thought process is. And we experience it in one way through waking attention, and we experience it kind of a different way through this subconscious dream state level of experience. We get a more raw, unfiltered stream of consciousness, undirected. It's just one connecting thought to another, and very often it is material from well, it's almost 100% material from our waking life, but it isn't always experiences. Very often it is, reviewing experiences. Sure, I went through this. What do I think of it? How do I feel about it? How might I process a trauma or a success even? But also our abstract thoughts during the day, our thought experiments. Sometimes we'll go into our dreams and we'll carry on that thought process of, I wonder about this thing. Well, what might that look like if I play it out as a thought experiment, basically. Yeah.
So it seems to me that dreams are often here. Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
That you kind of touched upon when you talked about dreams are kind of taken from our lived experience.
Mhm.
I heard someone say that the people that we see in our dreams, even though we don't recognize them per se, are actually faces that we've seen of people in real life that appear sort of as extras in our dreams. Is that a true assessment?
It very well can be. And this, just about anything you could ask about dreams is going to be true, sort of, in one way or another. So the way that is true is that, brain science type of thing. Our brain absorbs and processes everything we've ever seen, heard, thought, felt, experienced, all there. That's the subconscious. That's that general theory of that. So if you've seen a person in passing, it didn't register on your conscious attention, but that face, that image could show up in a dream later, because you're pulling things together. So that opens a fascinating realm too of why do you see, say, people you do know in dreams? Why are they there? Or why is it a person you've never seen before, but in the dream they're cast in the role of your friend? And that you have a knowing that this person is your friend, even though they're not a friend from real life. It's no one you've ever met. It's no one you've seen on television. It's no one you can remember seeing on the street. It's usually the concept of friendship that you're then looking at there. Now, if it's a specific friend, it's your relationship with that specific friend. If it's a person you've never met, but they are your friend in the dream, then you get that kind of idea of, okay, well, I'm looking at the general concept of friendship versus my friendship with a specific person. That's kind of how I start teasing apart the elements. Yeah.
So when someone is dreaming, let's say that you're prone to negative thoughts, and does that translate into your dreams where you're going to have negative dreams?
Yeah, I'd say your general personality in life, your general approach. If you're a very anxious person, you'll perhaps have a lot of fearful dreams. If you are a very confident person, you'll have more enthusiastic or adventurous dreams. It's not a direct correlation. It's very random each night. So when I say the brain never stops thinking, speaking of historical dream literature and such, there was a theory a long time ago that dreams were sent by the gods or whatnot, or they represented our body, our astral self leaving the body to go experience things. That was we moved through all of these theories, and now honestly I can't say a lot of that's true. I'm going to go in a million directions at once. That's how my brain works. I think that's how I do what I do. But what was I talking about? Theories of dreams. Can you bring me back on track? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just talking about how if your thoughts tend to be negative, how does that impact your dreams?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're typically an anxious or negative person, you're probably going to be processing a lot of anxious and negative thoughts. But this is where I was going to, is that since our brain never stops thinking, it is currently believed, and I believe myself, that you dream constantly the whole night through, but not all of those dream experiences we register as dreams, quote unquote. They don't rise to a level of conscious attention where we can remember that we had it. So in the history of dreams, what they once thought of, and what makes sense from a definitional perspective, is a dream is what you can remember when you wake up. in that
Right.
sense. Even if
Right.
we dream the entire night through, we don't come out with 8 hours or what of actual dream experience. Some things break through and some things don't. So and that's a great mystery too, is like, why do we focus on specific things? Why do certain dreams come through and others don't? Why do we remember? Now, some of it I think is biological. We're drifting in and out of different physical brain states, so to speak, wavelengths and whatnot. And some of them bring us closer to conscious awareness, and some of us take us deeper away from it. But I also tend to be of the belief that the dreams which you wake up from remembering intensely, feeling strongly about, there's something in there that you could probably benefit from understanding. He came out with you for a reason. And you can look at that as purely psychological. That's just how the brain works. Things that are important, we pay more attention to. You can look at it as spiritual and say, the powers that be, whatever they are, whatever you worship, is giving you a message. Hey, pay attention to this because it might be of benefit to you. It might be a lesson you need to learn. It might make your life better. That's my general perspective on that. Yeah.
And can a dream actually, because I've had dreams where I wake up and I'm absolutely exhausted from the dreams. What kind of process is going on to enable that to sort of manifest? I mean, sleep is supposed to be a time of rejuvenation and rest.
Yeah.
And just curious how that can be.
Yeah, and that takes us through the history of dream research itself. And the early, before the age of Freud and Jung, that really revolutionized. And whether you think either of them were absolutely correct about every theory, they did change it to a more medical and less philosophical or spiritual practice.
Right.
But before that, they were looking into, and we've had this question for centuries, probably up to 2 millennia. Why do we sleep at all? And within that context, why do we dream at all? Excuse me. There is the early theories were that we sleep because we must. The body becomes exhaustion. They said there was an early theory in the late to early 1800s, which was nervous exhaustion. Our nerves physically become exhausted by activity, and we must let the nerves relax. That's why the original conceptions of some psychological disorders were called nervous conditions, neuroses.
Okay.
Problems with the nerves. Yeah, exactly. So very, very early on, we had those philosophical perspectives of, well, we sleep because we must, and that's obvious, but why? Why must we? Well, tired nerves was one explanation. And more modern theories are that, we've noticed that there's a famous experiment where a radio host, he pulled a stunt. I'm going to stay awake for a week straight as a gimmick for his radio station. And after about 3 or 4 days, he started to hallucinate and he went psychotic and had some serious, had to be hospitalized. And that was one great example that people brought up of, like, sleep is not optional. It's not something you can short yourself on. It's like you can't stop eating, you can't stop sleeping, you can't do a lot of physical things that are just going to hurt you. It's not something we can play. It's not optional is what I'm saying. So I was going somewhere with all of that. Sleep, the nature of sleep, the history, the reason why we dream. Wow. Yeah, that's why I usually take notes. I'm not writing any of this down. Yeah, part of my process when I'm doing dreams with people is, I write down what they say, and then we go through it again, and I write down my thoughts and observations as we review it a second time. That's kind of my process. So otherwise, I'm a scatterbrain, which I think is part of my secret to success in terms of the dream interpretation thing, is my unique biology and psychology that kind of leans me in that direction of scatter shot of like a sparkler throwing off associations. Well, could mean this, could mean that. Okay, let me write all that down, and then I check with the dreamer to say, well, what do you think of these ideas? Which one kind of, you get a physical sensation, a zing that goes, wait a minute, that what you just said, that makes sense. Let me tell you why. Yeah, all that to say, I lost my train of thought completely. Sorry.
Well, Dan Lerman is asking if you're open to traveling in time and space.
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of ways to look at that. Broadly speaking, yes. Let's say astral projection. If I knew how to do that, absolutely, I would. Traveling in time, I'm not sure it's possible physically. Maybe it is. I'm not sure I would encourage it because the broken multiverse potential. If we hadn't learned anything from the last few years of media representations of how that could go horribly wrong, maybe we don't mess around with it. Space, not so much. I'm kind of an earthling. I mean, if there was a colony on Mars or Proxima Centauri, I'd probably never go there. I don't think I want to leave Earth. That's not my thing. I'll let other more adventurous folks do that. I like my wizard cave in and I like to not leave it. I'm a homebody, so I got my books and I've got people to talk to on the internet. I'm good. Not much of a traveler. So
you're talking about the history, and I'm wondering, what do you believe is the historical significance of dreams in different cultures, and how have they been interpreted throughout history to the point where we've absorbed that history?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back definitely to prehistoric times. I mean, given that we know animals dream, you've watched your dog or your cat, and they're
Right.
they're twitching in their sleep. They're doing something. So they've got a little bit of somnambulism going there, which is basically just your body's moving while you're asleep. Something's happening. So we know because humans were we've been animals longer than we've been humans. We also dreamed before we had the consciousness to reflect on dreams. And that's kind of where a lot of the tribal or indigenous or prehistoric understanding of dreams come from. And that's kind of where we went through those ideas of, well, if you had an experience, and again, one of these books has this description in there, if you are say a tribesman in pre language days, even, you're just living in a cluster with folks, and you wake up in the morning and you're like, I went somewhere, something happened. And they've had experiences, which I don't know what to make of this. I'm very much on the, there's the scientific and the spooky woo. And I call it that lovingly. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to deal with it, but let's say they had an experience of, I dreamed what was over that hill that we're about to cross tomorrow. And when they get there, it's exactly what he dreamed. So that like kind of precognitive or a prescient, what's the prophetic dreaming. So if folks had those, and that was very closely tied into the idea of they would bury objects with people, assuming that the soul continued living after death, because they had these dream experiences where I left my body, I went somewhere else and I did something else. So it's almost thought that, and this is a theory, and it makes a lot of sense to me, but I can't say 100%. But the very concept of religion, the concept that humans have a soul, is based in these early, cognitive understanding of dreams experiences where it felt like you would leave your body. So we must be more than just this physical form. So that we may owe the existence of religion to the fact of dreaming in and of itself. But not the only thing, but like that might have started it all way back in the day. I always thought that was a fascinating theory. So I'm not sure, but I wow, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Talking about like out of body experiences and things that we get from dreams. I'm curious, how are dreams different from psychotic induced drugs, for instance, like mushrooms or something like that, where you have these visions? Is that basically just a different type of a dream?
Well, it's very interesting. I would say we would let's see, if we try to go up the ladder to like the most broad level of understanding of things, we have multiple different states of consciousness, and just natural states of consciousness. We can be awake or asleep. We can be fatigued and inattentive. We can, they had, speaking of religious stuff, they had the whirling dervishes, the ecstatic people who would dance and spin in circles, and it would generate these altered states of consciousness. We have people that meditate, and that shifts your experience of the world. And there is what is it, DMT, I think. Now I can't talk to a doctor, and I don't know what's legal and what's not, but DMT is present in the brain and in sleep states. And there's some people who call it the sleep drug or something like that, or the dream drug. And then people who take that when they're awake, they have just very bizarre mind expanding that's a, what am I trying to say? That's one way to phrase it, consciousness raising or changing experiences, where they come out of it and they see the world differently afterwards. And the same with, say, LSD or mushrooms. We have A variety of ways we can alter our consciousness to change our immediate attention to details. And sometimes we get ourselves locked into ways of perceiving that prevent us from seeing the world differently. And sometimes if you break down some of those barriers to considering alternatives, you can then see the world in a different way and new connections form. And you go, oh, if I just step back and see the bigger picture, or if I consider other things might be connected, that might actually take what looks like this picture, turn it sideways, and the square is a circle now. I'm like, whoa. So there's a lot now how to do that safely, carefully. I mean, some people go to South America and do ayahuasca experiences.
Right.
Some people eat, psychedelics. A lot of people draw benefit from meditation. And of course, I think we all benefit from the natural altered consciousness of sleep and letting our mind process our experiences in the background and try to come to some new understandings.
How do you approach this dream analysis from an eclectic perspective? I mean, what mythologies or frameworks do you find are most effective in interpreting a dream?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because what does eclectic mean? It means I am not strictly a Freudian. I'm not strictly a Jungian, but I draw from both traditions and from every other theory I've ever come across of what this might be and what we're dealing with. But I do look at it. My eclectic approach is still built around the idea that humans are a physical animal. We have a brain with a biochemistry, and that psychology appears to be the best way to theorize what's, it has one of the best theories of mind is basically what psychology is.
Right.
Like, what is the mind? How does it work? And, what are we dealing with here? So I try to stay away from the things I don't understand. I try to stay in my lane as much as possible, which is if someone comes to me and say they had a prophetic dream, I would say, that's interesting. I can't tell you whether that's true or not. I can't explain to you how that happens. I can't explain what causes or prevents lucid dreaming. I've never had a lucid dream myself. Ironically, I rarely ever dream. So I stay in my lane of the purely physical, psychological, medical range and try and find useful meaning within that stuff using psychological principles of the theory of mind that says, we have experiences, they are encoded in the brain, we have memories, we have the ability to rationally think through things, we naturally draw associations. And so one thing I do not endorse is the idea of dream dictionaries. I consider that more on the spooky woo side. And actually a lot of that comes from the history of dreams. We've got a lot of the dream dictionaries are built on biblical stories, historical events, famous dreams that have been documented where they came true. And therefore a dream dictionary might say, if you dream of, seashells by the seashore, it means X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What seashore were you on? Who were you walking with? Do you have any memories from your past? And by a process of conversation, we'll come to the understanding that, you know what? That was one of my memories from childhood. My grandfather and I would walk on the beach collecting seashells, and I miss him. And it was recently the anniversary of his death. And I remembered a lesson he taught me, and it related to a real life experience I was going through. And I just realized what I need to do is handle that problem the way he would have advised me back in the day. And they get that light bulb turns on and they're like, I know what to do now. I know how to approach this problem in my life. And I wouldn't get there if I said, the great book says, if I didn't take a personal approach. So that's part of the eclectic nature, to bring it full circle. Part of the eclectic nature is it's always unique to the individual. There's never going to be one size fits all answer for dreams, even if we have common human experiences that because of the nature of being human and the way the brain works, etc. Yeah.
Now, does everybody dream? Because you mentioned that you don't dream that much, and I'm just wondering: does everybody? Are there people that just don't dream? And what's the theory behind that?
Well, I'd say there are many people out there who are like I used to be, which is where I thought I just didn't dream. And then I realized that didn't make any sense, that our thoughts really never stop. We just lose conscious attention to them. We lose consciousness into the dream sleep state. And the way I phrase it now is I tend to be a person who does not remember his dreams for whatever reason. It's not exactly like this, but there's kind of different levels. There's, full consciousness and abstracted or distracted daydreaming where you're still awake. Then there's a twilight area where you're falling into sleep or coming out of sleep. And there's a lot of unique experiences there we can talk about. But then there's levels of sleep where you're closer to conscious attention and awareness of the dream experience. And there's kind of deeper levels where you're still dreaming, but it's nowhere near your ability to remember it. It makes no impression on your conscious mind well enough to bring it out with you and remember it when you're awake. So that's what I tend to think I experience. I just tend to sleep so deeply that, what was one dream I remembered recently? It's a snippet. I was standing by the open rear passenger door of a white 4-door vehicle. That's it. That is the entire dream experience. No context, no experience beyond that. Just the open door. I'm standing there looking at the open door. Am I getting in? Am I getting out? Is it my car? Is it somebody else's car? I don't know any of these things. I have nothing but that one impression. So when I do remember anything, it's those snippets without enough story or context to really do anything with. So it's probably one of the reasons I'm endlessly fascinated by other people's dreams. I'm like, tell me your story. What do you experience? Tell me what dreaming's like. Let's do this.
Yeah. I mean, well, what is the relationship between dreams and the subconscious mind? And how can understanding this relationship benefit individuals in their waking lives to where?
Yeah, for sure. There's a long history of people taking dreams very seriously. We're going to get there. We're going to do a little bit of a circuitous route. So we go back to, say, ancient Greek times, and they would actually bring people into a temple, and they would have a specific ritual. You will eat these foods and bathe in this water and prepare yourself. And then that night you will lay down on this, bearskin rug or whatever before this altar, and you will receive a vision in the night from the gods, and that will advise you. And so we went from that extreme, and we kind of went down into an area where it was dismissed as inconsequential, random, the vapors, right? The theory of the humors, vapors rising. It's nothing but a lump of bad cheese. And now, to be honest, you can change your dream experience with chemicals, with food, with exertion during the day. Lots of things affect it. So indigestion during sleep does actually change the nature of your dreams. But we're going to say it's not always this primary cause. Okay, so the benefit of dreams, we're getting there. So there were people who dismissed it as completely useless, as a random experience that has no meaning whatsoever. That's the extreme end, and then the other end is that it is very significant. And there were people who, let's see, the second book I did, in which I had to translate a tremendous amount of Latin, was called The Mystery of Dreams. It was a sermon from a 1500s preacher about how to tell the difference between good dreams, warning dreams sent by God to keep you on track in a spiritual sense, and delusive dreams of the devil sent to tempt you and lead you astray. And even at that time, what the preacher was talking about was, if you are a person who lives their life, from his perspective, in sin, you're drinking and sleeping with prostitutes and bad mouthing your neighbor and just doing all kinds of nasty stuff, your dreams are going to be full of the experiences of your waking life. You're going to be doing these. You're going to indulge in lust in your dreams. You're going to have the experience where, sometimes he would even say that the devil will send you demons to torment you in your sleep, so that if you badmouth your neighbors in the light of day, at night demons will come to torment you by showing you your neighbors persecuting you, chasing you with the torch and pitchfork. Then again, on the other side of that, he would say that could also be a dream sent by a warning angel of God to say, look, if you keep sinning in this particular way, this is how it turns out for you. You get driven out of your village by these people that you treat poorly. So there's a couple of different ways to look at that. And that, I would say, that kind of comes around to the psychological value of dreams, is that we look at these situations and we say, if we have reason to question ourselves during the daytime, and those thoughts enter our mind, even if we don't notice them, even if it was fleeting for just a moment, we might come back to it in the night and go, I had a disturbing interaction with my friend. They let me know that something I did bothered them, and I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. And then the dream in the middle of the night kind of shows you, it plays out that thought experiment. What if I was in the wrong? Or let me examine the idea that I could be wrong and maybe show myself what this relationship looks like from my friend's perspective. A lot of it is gleaning that additional insights, the ability to look at ourselves in a less filtered way, where we have less of the, a lot of people are in denial, or they're very committed
Right.
to a particular way of seeing the world, and it's very hard to shake them out of that. Well, a lot of those defenses get dropped in the dream state, and you're just wide open to the raw thoughts and emotions, and it can show you things you don't want to see. And a lot of times nightmares are about that. It's like things you don't want to know, things that terrify you. And I think, we can get onto that too. I've had some great success with folks who had nightmares and recurring dreams, having those stop after talking to me. I'm like, I can't think of any better proof or what is it? Like, there's nothing more. There's no praise I could receive than someone saying you helped me. I'm not in it for the praise, but I want to know I did some good. And that's the best. That's the best it gets for me. So.
How do you stop recurring nightmares?
I would say, long story short, the answer is to understand them. I mean, what is going on here? So I had an episode, I think it was episode 12, 2-3 years ago at this point. I'm at a most recent episode 159. 1,000 episodes, I'll be a real wizard. We're working on that. About 840 to go, something like that. Okay, so this guy had a dream so he was a combat vet, retired, and his dream was doing a kind of military style recon sweep of a house that was full of people, but they were not, he was not there to socialize with them. He's there looking for a threat of some kind.
Right.
And eventually, same dream over and over again, eventually makes his way into the backyard. And as he attempts to continue his forward progress through the physical landscape, he is stopped and beat up by these shadow people. Now, there's some people who would go look at that and look at the spooky woo side of things and go, oh, wow, shadow people, demons, all that kind of stuff. Well, he and I looked at it as like, okay, we never identified what are those things, but we talked about the nature of the experience and the dream itself and the context, the surroundings, his personal life. And in my estimation, we got some clarity, some understanding, but we didn't get him an answer as much as I would have liked. I'm often left wanting at the end of some of these because I don't have all the answers. I tell folks the answers are not in me. I'm not a prophet. I'm not an oracle. I do not hear the voice of God. I'm not talking to spirits from the other side. I'm just a guy. You invite me into your head. I stand behind your shoulder and I shine a flashlight around and ask if we see the same thing. That's all I'm doing. Long story short, too late for that. He gets back to me a while later and he goes, the next time I had that dream, it felt differently. It wasn't as scary. And when I got to the shadow people, instead of trying to push past them and force my way forward, I just stopped and talked to them. And he said they were pretty cool guys. And they let me know that they were trying to protect me from something I wasn't ready to experience, that I wasn't ready to see beyond that wall. And this is where we get into the Freudian stuff. He talked about, people get down on him because he had a lot of theories that didn't pan out and some, Victorian era sexist ideas and whatnot, but still, honestly, a genius in literally invented talking therapy. Maybe if I talk to this guy, he'll feel better. We can work some things out. Long story short on that. He talks about defense mechanisms, and sometimes that's how a defense mechanism could be displayed. We could display an internal defense mechanism to ourselves in a dream. We prevent ourselves from thinking about things we're not ready to handle yet, perhaps. And sometimes we do that to our own detriment. And sometimes, honestly, we're not ready. We need to get ready before we're ready to open. Otherwise, you do more harm than good confronting some issues. That's why therapy's got to be real delicate. But if, that's when you think of it from that perspective, the idea of, well, what would a defense mechanism look like in your brain? It might look like shadow people beating the hell out of you, stopping you from getting somewhere you think you want to go, but part of you knows you're not ready for that yet. Yeah. I don't even know if that answers your question. So I go off on some.
It absolutely does. And it kind of leads into my next question, which is I was wondering if you could elaborate on the concept of actually using dreams as a means of problem solving, and examples of how other patients or individuals have utilized their dreams to overcome some challenges in their life. And that's one way that you just provided one example of that.
For sure. Yeah. And it's great. I love looking at, 30,000 foot overview of something. So the general concept is that when we shut down our conscious attention for the night and we go to sleep, anything can bubble up to the surface that might be of benefit. Now, sometimes we just give ourselves a fun little adventure. I was flying and I did this thing and it was great and I loved it and I enjoyed it. And dreams can be nothing more than just a fun adventure, like, reading a fairy tale or whatever.
Right.
Although a lot of fairy tales actually have a lot of very, very symbolic significance. One thing most people have probably heard is the idea of, well, if you don't know what to do, sleep on it. And for a long time in my life, I thought, well, that's just good advice to say, don't rush to a decision if you're uncertain, give it time. Well, then I started thinking, why do we give it time? What happens in the time we give it? And a lot of, whether we know it or not, a lot of what happens is some, what I call percolation, like making coffee. The idea just percolates in the background, even if we're not giving any conscious attention. And later on, a solution comes to us that we just could not brute force manifest in that moment yesterday. And now I've started to think of the idea of sleep on it as being literal advice. If you don't know what to do, if you don't know what decision to make on a particular thing, don't. Give it time, but not just time, give it sleep. Let yourself sleep on it. And I've had so many experiences and multiple over the last, month or two, where I don't know what to do. I don't know how to phrase something. I don't know how to solve a particular problem. I don't know, how I want to approach a particular situation. I go to bed. I wake up in the morning. I know exactly what to do. What happened? I don't know. I have no memory of a dream, but I know that some problem-solving, decision-making process happened during that downtime that allowed me to see it more clearly in the morning. And I think I'm almost certain I had some kind of a dream that explored it as fully as I needed to get a grip on how do I feel about it? What do I think is likely? What do I think is going to be the most effective solution? So yeah, I think that's the primary benefit of, even if you don't do a dream analysis or there's no dream to analyze in the morning, nothing you remember, I think one happened and you're more likely to get an answer than not, I think.
Now, do you deal with patients regularly, or do you still, or?
No. My experience was in psychiatry was in emergency inpatient. So what I was dealing with, what I was dealing with was people at their most severe. So when people say they've seen it all, I've pretty much seen it all in terms of like the most severe cases of schizophrenia, bipolar, suicidal depression, all of that kind of stuff. And and I don't see private clients now. I don't have the a therapist license. So that's, like I say in my disclaimer, these are all for entertainment purposes only. I do not offer any licensed service. We're just, and I tell this to clients or guest dreamers behind the scenes. We're just two people talking about dreams. There's no charge for this. This is actually a good time to tell people a little bit about that process too. So I will literally, number one, talk to anybody. You don't have to be someone shilling a book. You don't have to be anyone with clout on the internet. It doesn't matter to me. You got a dream, we can talk. And I'm not overwhelmed currently. So if you want to talk to me, reach out, go to, benjamindreamwizard.com as a contact thing. There's a listing of all my social media. And the things I tell folks is, number one, I do not record without permission. I do not release episodes until I get permission afterwards. And that includes if you want me to edit material. You talked about your niece and you don't want her business on the internet. That 30 seconds is gone. That's a real example. You'll never know what episode that was from or who I was talking to because it's gone. Also, if we get to the end of a dream interpretation experience, and this is all, pre-recorded, not live type, we do this, privately. And you don't want anyone to see that. No hard feelings. You did not waste my time. I got practice at the experience. All of this is me refining my process and getting better at what I do. Never hesitate to say, I don't feel comfortable with that. That's too personal. I think that makes me look bad. I think that's embarrassing. No one will ever see it. I will destroy the video. It's gone for good. No one signs a release on my show. No one gives me anything more than verbal permission. This is all a handshake deal. And I got tested on that. One, a person I did an interpretation with 2 years ago got back to me recently and said, hey, can you take that video down? I don't want that out there. Gone. No questions asked. Now, I think I understand the reason, but I never asked and I never will. Then it doesn't matter because this is not the Jerry Springer show. I'm not just trying to make content I'm not looking to embarrass anyone. I'm not looking to put content out there that makes anyone look bad. I will go weeks with no show because whatever, there was no one to talk to, or I had someone to talk to and they asked me, please don't release the video. I destroyed it. It's gone. Never, no one's ever going to see it. And there's two reasons for that. One is, number one, that's just the right thing to do. That's just my personal ethics. The idea of, it is wrong. From my perspective, it is a moral wrong to betray someone, to have someone give you their trust, to make such promises to them, and then to betray them. That's just wrong. I just won't do that. Number two, everyone that I talk to, and this is the same in a clinical counseling setting, you need to trust the person you're talking to, or you're not going to say what you really think. You're not going to follow the trains of association that are going to give you the best answer. So it's almost pointless to do the process if you're not being honest with yourself, with the person you're talking to. And that means confidentiality has to be a primary promise, first and foremost, above everything else. And I got to follow through on that. And then, most people are trepidatious, especially since they're like, I talked to a bunch of people who are like, well, I've never put my face and voice on the internet before. I don't know, how's this going to work? And I'm like, don't worry, you can't do it wrong. But by the time they get to the end of the process, they're like, that was fun. That was a unique perspective. That was a good understanding. I think I got something out of it. And I don't think it made me look like an idiot. And you're welcome to put it on the internet. That was great. That was great. Let other people enjoy what we just experienced. And I'm always very grateful about that.
Perfect. And we got your website down below, benjaminthedreamwizard.com. And you can get in touch with Benjamin, explore all of his books. You're an intrepid writer, by the way.
We've got a few there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I want to be honest. I have not, none of these are entirely original works. And that's the important, these are historical dream literature. So as you can see, The Fabric of Dreams on the screen there, my most recent book, Catherine Taylor Craig, she wrote that book about 100 years ago. And what I'm doing is restoring, reproducing, enhancing in a modern version that has additional reference material in the notes. So you'll find, so I don't ever want it to appear that these are all original works by me. These are all reproductions of historical works to preserve them for, otherwise they're going to be lost to history, I think. So, yeah.
Now, a couple questions, a little bit maybe sidetracked, but I'm curious, what role do you think technology, such as virtual reality or artificial intelligence, what role could they play in advancing our understanding of dreams and their potential applications?
That has been a fascinating subject for, at the very least, decades. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is the question posed by the title of the Philip K. Dick short story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? We might conceptualize it from that perspective. Like, if there is a true artificial intelligence android, Data style from Star Trek, one of the episodes there was about his dreams. He got an upgrade and was able to experience dreams, and they were weird. He would open his chest and there was a telephone in there, and it was a message from Picard, that kind of thing. But one way we might know that such a thing was truly a sentient creature does it dream? And are those dreams as strange as ours? And can they kind of be interpreted in a way that makes sense from the idea of, well, if we understand the associative links, then it kind of starts to come into a cohesive narrative. What was it about, and what does it mean to you? But there's other, and I love sci-fi for this. There's a way I look at science fiction is like, science fiction is in some ways predictive programming, but it's also prophecy. Like if you think back to the old sci-fi series, the original Star Trek series from the 60s, they had the communicators. And what does that make you think of? The Motorola Razr flip phone. So now, was that predictive of what was coming in the future? Or did someone look at that and go, we should build that? We need that.
Right.
We need a communicator. And then they style it in the flip, after. So there's kind of a mutually informed relationship between the two things. But okay, so there've been a number of movies and short stories and books and stuff like that. One of them was about people who, let's see, it was a long time ago. It was in the late 80s. People who developed a technology to record their own dreams, and what happened to the researchers. Does that sound familiar to you? Does that movie?
Yes.
God, it was forever. I can't think of the name or who was in it, but they became kind of obsessive and addicted to reviewing and watching their own dreams and spending too much time reliving those experiences and not enough time interacting with. I think there was a theme to it of like, what are you doing with your life if you're so obsessed with this one thing that's happening when you're asleep that you're not living, you're not making relationships with people, that you're ignoring everything else that's going on in life. So that's one thing, is like, what would happen if we could record our dreams and share them? Would we become obsessed with them to the point, in a way that was not entirely healthy? Or would it actually give us the ability to each of us become our own dream interpreter in that sense, which I think is honestly something people can do. Is like, it helps very often to have someone to talk about it out loud, but you can always write it out for yourself and then kind of do the process you see me do. So I chalk it up to, education in the categories on YouTube, is the idea that by observing my process, what I do, you can kind of do this for yourself. And a lot of people have done so. Here's one of my.
There's a cat.
She's got a naked butt. This one's losing her fur. She's old. This is one of our oldest cats. She's just hanging in there. You can kind of do that. And then sometimes, but what I'm saying is, you don't need me. You don't need Mr. Wizard to help you specifically. It's nice. I would like to talk to you, but in the future, if there's just too many people for me to talk to, it would be nice if I could demonstrate my process. And that is an original work I hope to get around to very soon, is dream interpretation the wizard's way, or something like that. And I'll as soon as I understand what I'll do, I'm going to write a book about what it is. So, yeah.
Are there any misconceptions about dreams that you frequently encounter, and how do you address those in your work?
Yeah. Everyone that I talk to comes to me with their own understanding of what dreams are, how they work, and if it's relevant, if it's necessary, I might address that. It's usually in these type of interview settings where we're not interpreting a dream. You're not a dreamer bringing an experience to me to help you understand. This is where I do most of the sharing of my theoretical perspective. Now, how certain am I that this is exactly the way it is? More or less, sometimes, varies by subject, but hopefully the proof of the accuracy of my theoretical understanding is that it gets results. Now, maybe those two things are completely disconnected. Maybe I've got like this superpower on one side and I've got what I think makes it work on the other, and they're not related at all. I think they are related, but again, is my opinion. So, but yeah, in terms of misconceptions, like, a lot of people come with the idea that dream dictionaries have validity. And what I don't like to do is do too much confrontation in dream work. And if I pull in a particular direction and someone is offering pretty heavy resistance, what we don't have is an extended clinical therapeutic relationship to rely on so that I can push back and be trusted, so that takes a while to develop that rapport. But also, I can't come back to something. I can't put a pin in it and come back to it later, 3 or 4 or 10 weeks down the road, and say, here's something I've had a feeling we needed to talk about. You haven't been comfortable, but today I would like to ask you to endure that discomfort and let's open that door. That's also a reason I go all over the place. I don't know if any of this is related. Sorry. That's one of the reasons there's a couple of pieces of dream material that I will not cover because I think it's unethical to do so. And those are related to childhood abuse and sexual assault. If you are having actual recurring nightmares, dreams about experiences you had in life of being assaulted or molested or abused as a kid, I need you to take that to a professional and handle that privately. I feel it is inappropriate to have that be fodder for entertainment, and the fact that I can't handle it in an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour session of dream interpretation, as I can't walk you through that to a healthy place on the other side of examining that material. Even if you might benefit from the interpretation, even if it might give you some clarity on some things, even if it might make you feel better afterwards, I feel like the risk is just too high that I'm going to do some manner of harm, and I won't do it. So I'm sorry if you're having dreams of that nature. I cannot help you. I'm going to refer you to a private clinical setting to deal with that. I think that was related to something. I lose my train of thought so much.
Oh, hey, I have the same problem, so don't worry about it.
Mhm. Thanks for understanding.
Is there any ongoing research or developments in the field of dream analysis that you find particularly exciting or promising at the moment?
Well, probably the most recent piece that is still kind of ongoing. So we talk about Freud and Jung, and those guys 100 years ago, 120 years ago at this point. There was this guy out of the University of UC Santa Cruz, I believe, named G. William Domhoff, and he's retired professor, and he set up what is called dreambank.net. And it is a collection of people's dream experiences. And he took a different approach to it of trying to more statistically quantify what people were experiencing. So, and that's also, this is where my approach is eclectic. That's informed my approach as well. And I've been trying to more explicitly incorporate that into how I walk through the deep dive portion of the collaborative dream analysis process. So what he would want to know is so you tell him the whole dream, and when he'll go through it, he'll start counting. There were 2 physical locations in the dream. There were 3 buildings present at one location and no buildings present at another. There were 4 representations of types of animals. There were 3 separate emotional states you went through, and then list those emotional states. And I think that's valuable from the perspective of not getting lost in the shuffle. It's a little more systematic version of what I do, where I'm not just loosey-goosey. Like if you can sweep the floor by just kind of sweeping over here, or you can go row by row with a vacuum, nice and neat, and make sure all the rows are lined up, and then you don't miss anything. So that's the systematizing of something. So I'm trying to incorporate those 2 at once. I want to go loosey-goosey with follow my exploding mind tangentialness, but I also want to make sure I don't miss anything that might be relevant. So I've been trying to work that in. So the most recent stuff that I'm familiar with is Professor Domhoff's idea of being a little more systematically careful about detailing the different elements and making sure you don't miss something that might be relevant. But this also brings me to the idea of, original works. First, so I've been publishing these since 2020, here we're in 2024, and I've got probably about 5 or 6 more books to go that are just full of existing material. And the reason I'm doing that is that's me teaching myself by doing a review of the literature and the history, because you don't get anywhere. Otherwise, I'm going to reinvent the wheel. Well, you don't want to do that. You can't think all the thoughts that have ever been thought. You want to read that stuff. So I do these first, and actually, books 3, 4, and 5 are a anthology series that does kind of a chronological view of shorter works, and that's the next few publications I've got coming, which are collections of additional anthology material. This one's 100 pages, this one's 30 pages. Well, let's get them in a book so that they don't get lost. Then I want to get down the road to the idea of writing more original works, and the series that I've got planned is it's going to be called A Wizard's Guide to XYZ, like Plumbing for Dummies, or an Idiot's Guide to Windows XP, those kind of books. But it'll be more for probably the first work I'm going to do is A Wizard's Guide to Aesop's Fables. And I'm going to go through it and say, here's the psychological principles we know today, and this is what they knew 2,500 years ago in the time of Aesop, here's why it's things like, we understand the metaphor, a wolf in sheep's clothing, Aesop's fables, the fox and the sour grapes. Oh, I didn't want them anyway. They were probably sour. Being in denial, as Freud popularized Aesop's fables. All of these stories are ancient, and it shows us that we've been human a long time, and what it means to be human doesn't really change. We're still confronting these same human behaviors. It was another book. I was telling you that whole story to get around to something else. You'd asked me about something. Shit. Sorry, I don't know if you curse on your show.
Oh no, you're absolutely welcome to say whatever.
I'm a salty sailor sometimes.
No, perfectly fine.
No, you'd ask me about something. Oh, systematic research. Okay, research. This, wow, all the way around. Sometimes I can pick up the thread. That is one of the books I have planned as well, is to get into books of more recent dream research, because I'm going back early 1900s to antiquity. The next step is to then start looking at all the research that's been done since. And I don't know that it's changed anything fundamentally. It's probably proven some concepts. I've done a lot of my own research, but I haven't pulled it all together. That'll be some more original works of literature review of the last 100 years of stuff, since I've been focusing on everything prior to the last 100 years. So I'm going to get there eventually. This is kind of my, my twilight years project of like, I didn't want to work in inpatient psychiatry anymore. I didn't want to be, as much as it may be necessary to keep someone out of trouble in the middle of a psychotic break. I put in my time as a mental health prison guard, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I needed to move on to something that's a little more collaborative and, inspirational for me, not just kind of, that's a tough thing too. It's like, there aren't many people that make it that long in that profession. I'm actually rather temperamentally suited, I think, to what is it called? Enduring, being tolerant of my own suffering, watching other people suffer. And that's, God, it's hard. It's hard. Burnout is usually less than 7 years in that. I made it about 20 some odd. So rather proud of that, but at a certain point you paid your dues, and I had to get out. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a mental health crisis in this country.
Yeah.
And, as you said, there's a high turnover rate for people that deal with that. And it's not a rewarding career in terms of, it's not lucrative in terms of income. Health insurance doesn't cover a lot of therapy. So, there's a real crisis going on in the country. And I want to thank you for putting in your time trying to tackle that, because I imagine that you've dealt with a lot of people on the ledge.
Yeah, literally had to, in the hospital, stop a few people from hurting themselves or others, and including, fairly serious suicide attempts in the hospital. That's one of those things where, it can still happen there. You got to be real careful. You got to be vigilant, almost hyper vigilant for your 8 or 12 hour shift. And it's really tough. And there's a lot of issues wrapped up with that in terms of, are we doing the best we can or not? Are there ways to do it better? I've seen people swept up in doctors being overly cautious. Like, here's a person who, in my opinion, didn't belong there, but it's not my liability. In my opinion, they should not be on a hold for X number of days. But I have no power to release them. Actually, I'm obligated to honor the hold and keep them there, even if I sympathize with them. But then the other side of it is, I've seen people let go. I'm like, that person's not okay. They're going to die. And then they did. That's tough. And it's a judgment call. And it's like, how do you know for sure? And you're gambling in some ways. So are we better off locking up more people that don't need it, just in case someone falls through the cracks? Or do we err on the side of, we should, imprison fewer people, even if we miss one or two that might, have a disaster? How responsible are we to get that right? How do we know we've got it right? I came out of that experience not even knowing if there's any way to do it better. It's so
really,
it's tough. Yeah. Cause I've seen it both ways. I've seen it from both sides. of the coin, where I'm like, and then what would I do? How could I live with that responsibility? And it's not just so for doctors, they've got licensure, they've got
Right.
what do you call it? Money when they get sued, malpractice insurance
Malpractice,
issues, and it isn't just that, but it's like you don't want your life ruined and you don't want your patient's life ruined. I mean, I don't think any of these doctors didn't care, and they were making the best decisions they could, but there's a lot of pressures on both sides to, and then there's issues of, funding, and there's issues of the public perception of mental health, and it gets complicated from there too. So wish I had all the answers. That's why I'm a wizard of dreams and not a wizard of fixing the mental health system. I don't think I can do that. Yeah.
How do you see the future of dream analysis evolving, and what advancements or innovations do you anticipate in the coming years?
Oh, wow. So two-part question there. So the first part, I'm hoping my efforts in some small way popularize the idea that dreams can be, dream analysis specifically can be useful to the individual. And hopefully, ideally it would be wonderful. I get tremendously popular and people like develop a new respect for it, or at least I'm part of the trend that raises the level of respect for the idea. It's not dismissed or poo-pooed or considered silly or useless or dismissed out of hand. So that would be nice. And at the very least, maybe 100 years from now, someone will find my books and go, I better republish these before we forget, and then what I've done has kept us from losing a piece of history that is, very, I think, relevant, necessary, important, that kind of thing. Right. The second question, some of the, you asked me earlier, and this is an interesting way to look at this too. So what is one of the recent developments that, scientifically, that affected how we understand dreams? And one of them is that most people are under the impression that we only dream during REM sleep, rapid eye movement. Right. Yeah. Now that actually turned out to be a myth. So what they did was they woke people up, the original studies, they woke people up when they were having rapid eye movement and asked them, were you dreaming? And they said, yeah. And they go, REM, dreams. That's what it is. You're dreaming. Then the more recent experiments were they woke people up at random other times and asked them, were you dreaming? And everyone always says yes. If you wake someone up from a dead sleep and ask them, were you dreaming? They were, which is one of the reasons that I believe we dream constantly, is because if you do the experiment and you ask a person, were you dreaming? No matter when you wake them up, they were dreaming. So that is something I hope to get to through my own literature reviews. Like, okay, well, where could we go next? What kind of assumptions have we had in the past that maybe not conducive to the best understanding of dreams and sleep and whatnot? What could I advocate we challenge? What new research should we be doing? Now that said, because humans have a basic biological nature and a psychology that goes with that, physiological, because of the way our brains are sectioned off and the way our neurons work and memories work and all of that stuff, that's kind of dialed in psychologically. There may be new advancements, but I don't think too much is going to change about the value or methods of dream interpretation too much. I think we may have hit it. Now, no matter what society or era or belief system you're in, the people at that time and that place always say we're at the pinnacle. So am I wrong? Probably. But there does seem, like you ask people, 100 years ago or in 1850, this is the peak of modernity and science, and we've reached the top. No, we weren't even close. We're not even close now. So likely something's going to change. I'm not, long story short, I'm not entirely certain what it is, but then I don't know that human nature is going to change unless we start getting into intentional modifications that the results of which we can't predict, biologically changing, through gene therapies and different stuff, how the brain functions, merging with machine consciousness through Elon's Neuralink, the ability to read, write memories into a kind of digital storage in the brain. That actually fascinates me quite a bit in terms of once we get Neuralink and subsequent technology that allows us to download information from the internet and then upload information as well, that we can add and subtract memories and information that is not hard coded into our gray matter. It's hard coded into a chip in our brain that can be accessed by our brain. How is that going to change the way we experience dreams? How is that? I rambled too much, but still, the idea of, as I said earlier, the idea of what is the subconscious? There was, for a long time, it was a hotly contested, controversial topic. Is there even any such thing as the subconscious? And now we're like, yeah, that's kind of a standard psychological principle. There's our conscious thoughts and attention, and there's the subconscious. That's things that it's everything. It's the vast reservoir of everything we've ever thought, heard, seen, smelled, experienced, every emotion, everything we've ever done, because those things exist in neuronal connections. As soon as we've experienced it, it's in there forever. And that's the subconscious. Now, we don't always have access to it. Now, imagine technology gives us complete, perfect recall of everything. We all develop that photographic memory that some people have now. That, I think, will change the nature of how we experience dreams and how we're maybe able to access them while we're awake. Imagine you could replay an entire recording of 8 hours of dreams. That brings in that question from that movie earlier. Like that's the technology that's going to allow us to better understand our dreams or obsess about our dreams way more than we should. Who knows? People might play their dreams back to themselves as movies rather than going to the theater. Who knows? Yeah.
Are we getting into dangerous territory though with Neuralink, Elon Musk Neuralink?
We should tread very carefully. As I said earlier about travel, it's like I'm not going to another planet. I'm not going to do that. No desire to. I don't have that wanderlust, but also that's real dangerous. That's something I'm just not going to take the risk. So, am I ever going to get a Neuralink or a read-write chip in the brain? Nope, not me. I'm pretty, and this is pure speculation and opinion, but I'm pretty anti-transhumanist, merging with machines. I will not be doing that. I also tend to lean very libertarian on the political side of things. So I'm like, hey, if that's your thing, man, it's not my body. You do what you want. I hope it doesn't hurt you. I can't recommend it, but I'm not going to use force to stop you because I don't know. You're not me. So I tend to be on that side of things of like, but if someone were to ask me, hey, Ben, do you think I should? I'd be like, I'm not going to do that. I don't think so. Now, flip side, I'm always trying to think of both sides because, what is it? Sometimes what does it matter what I think? It's like, what's the truth? There was a video of a guy paralyzed in a wheelchair, and he's one of the Neuralink test subjects, and he is controlling a mouse clicker with his brain on the screen in front of him. And he's like, this is the best thing ever. I can actually use a computer again. Yeah. So, I mean, allowing paralyzed people the ability to interact and eventually maybe even walk again. That's amazing. I can't say that's a bad thing. But I think we should tread very carefully, but and that there's a big difference between restoring function and fundamentally altering what it means to be human.
Right.
I'm very sketchy. I'm very sketchy on that side of things. Yeah. I think humans should stay humans and not merge with machines. That's just my opinion.
So you're not going to be interested. We offer every guest on this show a Neuralink chip.
That is very kind of you. I appreciate it. No, thank you. Yeah. That's,
okay.
You can pass it along to the next person.
Darn.
That's okay. No hard feelings.
Going back to dreams in the analysis, are there dream symbols or archetypes that you find particularly intriguing or maybe challenging to interpret?
Yeah, no, that's a great, again, brain explosion. Like, why do I call myself a wizard? What does that mean? Am I just some kooky guy who's, some kooky, crazy guy who thinks he's a wizard? Well, yes. And, it's symbolic and I think very true. Like, so what is an archetype? I mean, it's a recognizable pattern. And where do we get the wizard stereotype or archetype from? And we look at Gandalf. He's the tall guy with the gray beard and long gray hair, and he's got the hat and the staff. And why that image? Why does everyone look at that and know exactly what it is? Now, part of it is media training and storytelling, and we've told ourselves what that means, but it's also very representative of the word wizard comes from it's related to the word wizened, meaning old, and from the Old English word wise, W-Y-S-E. And that's where we get, the idea of a person who is wise. They are, what is wisdom? It is being old enough to know some things. And so at a certain point, you're old. You've got the wrinkles. You've got the gray hair. You're walking with the staff. Why? Because your back is sore and your legs don't work so good. You're old. And that's what a wizard is. It's this symbolic archetype of a person who has lived long enough to know some things. And where do we get the idea that a wizard can speak magic words? Well, if you know some things and you can communicate that to someone and you can help them have a positive effect in their life or
Right.
sharing wisdom, that's magic words. And why do we say wizards can see the future? They've lived long enough to understand cause and effect. They'll tell you, Sonny, I wouldn't do that. I've been young like you are. That's a mistake. Let me tell you what's going to happen. And then if you don't listen and it happens, you're like, whoa, how did he know the future? It's cause and effect. I mean, so some of these things that are like, they're both, I think we've lost the idea that science is freaking magical. Science is magic. It's
Yes,
just,
absolutely.
I think that's my concept of magic is it's enough science with enough mystery and just like the dream interpretation thing. Where do my suggestions and associations come from? I don't know. It could be the Greek muses. It could be literally spirits from the other side. It could be God. I don't know. I don't claim that because I don't know. But no matter how prepared we are for a new idea, no matter how much knowledge we've accumulated, there is a gap at the top of that pyramid between everything we already know and the new thing, that flame of knowledge or the opening of the third eye. What is in that gap? That gap, in my estimation, is magic. It's the magical something we can't quantify that gets us from everything we knew before to something we've never thought of before. I was going somewhere with that too. Archetypes. Okay. I'll bring it back around. So those go across. So that's why I draw on Jungian, is because he started looking at, he was a big fan of Joseph Campbell and Here with a Thousand Faces and looking at mythology. And a lot of our mythological representations are very similar. I don't know if you've heard, was it Jordan Peterson talk about the Assyrian god Marduk? I'm getting that wrong. Babylonian god Marduk. He had the ability to speak magic words, and he had eyes all around his head so he could see in every direction at once. And that is kind of an early prototypical wizard archetype of the idea of someone who, and he was the one who wrestled the Tiamat, the dragon god of chaos, and created the world out of chaos. So if we think of it like what is the essence of wizardry, it is the ability to wrestle with chaos and turn it into a functional order that we are able to live in. And that's what the Babylonians worshipped as like their primary god at the top of their pantheon. But other archetypes, nothing's coming to mind. I'm drawing a complete blank on literally every other archetype. And how does that relate to your original question again? You asked me something about that.
Well, no, I was just wondering if there's any archetypes that you find intriguing or challenging to interpret.
And difficult. Yeah. So where do we go with this? Literally, I can't think of a single other archetype. There's a bunch of, like, there's the mother, the lover, there's a bunch of the fool, the savior. There's a bunch of them. Wow, I'm glad I was able to think of just a handful of them. There's many more than that. And so that's the Jungian side of things, but I don't focus on that. I'm not always looking for an archetypal situation. I am looking for distilling things down from common human experience. So another Jungian concept was the collective unconscious, and people, I think we were talking about misconceptions people had about dreams and psychology in general. Sorry. A lot of people don't quite grasp what the collective unconscious is. Some people dismiss it as spooky woo, like this layer of psychic connection that we all have. I think that is part of it. And I don't dismiss that. I don't understand it completely, but it is also what they used to call racial memory, or the idea of what has been passed down to us as a genetic inheritance from our ancestors. And I think that's very relevant in the idea of we are human as they were. We experience the same human problems. We all need to drink water. We all need to breathe air. We all need to eat food. We all have a certain social experience when we come together to eat food. We all have a certain understanding of the holiday spoiled by bickering when we come together to eat food. So you go from these broad collective consciousness type of common human experience, and you start distilling it down to your specific human experience. And then that, and so when we have those dream experiences, that's the process I tend to go through when I'm helping someone sort through it, is like, okay, first of all, how might we look at this? The example I used of walking on the seashore, collecting seashells on the seashore. For one person, it might mean one thing, and for another person, it's going to mean something completely different. But we all know what the ocean is. Probably, maybe there's one person that doesn't. We all know, or at least have seen the idea of a seashell in a picture, in an image. And so I start getting, well, have you ever been to the ocean? No, never. You lived in Iowa your whole life. Okay, so this is not about an actual ocean experience for you. This is about your concept of the ocean. Well, tell me about that. What comes to mind when you think of the ocean? And like, travel. One of my favorite movies as a kid was Titanic, and then we start getting okay, so like going on a wide open horizon for an adventure. But the idea that then also that they thought they mentioned the idea of Titanic, I'm like, so actually your concept of this was connected to a movie where there was actually a big disaster when someone goes on an adventure. And have you ever gone on an adventure? And they'd be like, no, I was always too scared. I'm like, so you've actually been letting yourself maybe be held back by the concern that if you leave your safe and comfortable surroundings, to have an adventure, there's going to be a disaster. It's like, yeah, actually, that's probably why I've never gone. I'm like, well, what do you now we get to that point in this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not telling them you should not feel that way. That's bad. You should want to embrace risk and adventure. That's up to you. I have no opinion on that. I'm like, well, what do you think? What would make you, do you feel like you're missing out on something? Yeah, sometimes. Do you want to get out of your hometown? I'd like to see the world. I'm like, do you think that's likely? Is that something you're putting plans into? It's like, actually, that next part of the dream, yeah, that's where that came from. I've been looking at booking a flight to Ireland. Like, this is all speculative. I'm just making this up out of my head, but that's how we start narrowing this stuff down. And then I'm like, oh, bam, just by talking it through, now we've got the entire second half of the dream. Well, what does that dream say about what you think you're likely to experience that second half when you go on this trip to Ireland, or if you allow yourself to imagine yourself going there? I think, okay, so I could just talk myself back around in a circle to the idea of, the challenging perspectives of things is I'm only able to make suggestions based on what I think. Right. Here's have you thought about it? So I'm only able to ask a certain range of questions based on what I'm able to generate in my own mind. And what I try to focus on or challenge myself to do is ask better questions, ask more questions. One thing that I'm naturally autistic, so I don't have a strong emotional response. You may not know it. Talking to me, I covered pretty well, but I forget to ask people, how did you feel in their dreams? So that's one of my blind spots, is the idea of accessing emotional content. I also forget to ask people if they've seen color in their dreams, because that can mean something. Colors can be very powerful. Sometimes material gets volunteered. So yeah, so probably the biggest challenge for me is identifying and accounting for my own blind spots. And that's why I'm not kidding when I say, when I get to 1,000 dreams interpretations, I'll be a real wizard. So hopefully I will have worked through all those challenges. And at that point I'll be a real dream wizard. So.
Now we kind of covered this a little bit, but I'm curious. And this is a kind of two questions here. Can dreams serve as a form of prophecy or precognition? And if so, how do you distinguish between symbolic interpretation and potential glimpses into the future?
Yeah, for sure. And that's going back to the review of the literature. There is a very strong dichotomy of people who are absolute materialists, rationalist, medical science, only what we can prove. And that's one view of it. And that's the realm I tend to swim in mostly. There's another side that is more the spiritual, metaphysical, occult leaning side of things, which, as I said before, I call it the spooky woo side. And a lot of people use that term dismissively. Not me. I use it affectionately. I like, yeah, that's some spooky woo right there. I don't know what to do with it. And it's a smile when I say it, just because it's out of my realm of expertise. So that's one thing I can't do is tell someone, if they bring me a dream and they say, Ben, I had this dream. Is this dream prophetic? I would go, I have no idea, man. I couldn't tell you. Now that said, I believe stories that are in these books that these folks have collected of people that dreamed. There's one story of a man who told a dream at the breakfast table, and that was a tradition. Some people do, some people don't. But in this family, they would talk about their dreams at the table. And he said, I had this dream about our family dog, and having been hit by a train, and that it drowned in the water. Come to find out, that's exactly what happened. Their family dog had run off to the back of the property, was dragged by a train, and found in the water, dead. Can't explain it, but I believe that story is true, that the person told that story in the way it happened. And why am I credulous about those things? Anyone can say anything. It could be pure fiction. I have real life friends. Guy that lives half a mile from me. He says, Ben, I have had a dream, and a week later, those exact events in that exact order, the angle of my head as I was looking at this thing, the words that were spoken, exactly like my dream. I don't know what to do with that. I think it's true. I think it's real, but I can't differentiate it from, the week prior when he told me this dream and asked me, what do you think? I mean, I don't know. Now that's the other side of the collective unconscious stuff that Jung was talking about, was that there may be, and there probably is, a layer of human interconnectedness that happens on some kind of a psychic plane. That's a weird thing for a psychological professional on the materialist scientific medical side of things to say, but we don't know as much as we think we do about human experience. And speaking of Titanic, there were multiple reports of dreams happening before that event took place, people saying that ship's going to crash, and advising friends or family not to get on the boat. And one guy, his wife said, don't go on this trip, and because the boat's going to sink, and he stayed home. And I think it was an accident. I think he was going to go. He was like, tut mother, it'll be okay. And then his business dealings got canceled, and so he didn't get on the boat, and then it sank. Now people will go, yeah, but this is confirmation bias. We just look at the prophecies that were true, and we ignore all the ones that weren't. I don't know. But I am I call myself a credulous skeptic. Like, I will believe anything, but I gotta be certain it's actually true. I gotta see enough. I gotta see enough proof that it's. So I don't rule out anything. Aliens, sure. Probably. I haven't seen one. As soon as that's another funny thing. Like, someone said, Ben, what do you believe in, like, werewolves, aliens, vampires? And I'm like, in order to believe in that stuff, I would have to experience it directly. And I never want to experience that directly. So I'll just be happy never knowing whether ghosts are real. Never. That's okay with me.
Right. Can the symbolism and themes present in dreams provide clues or warnings about potential mental health issues or underlying psychological conditions?
Yeah, there was actually something I was going to get down to, or get around to eventually. Then you brought it back to mind. So there was one of the stories from the books. That, again, back to the books. I love these stories. That's why I know this stuff. It's because I've read the books. There was a guy who had a dream, and in this dream there was a giant lobster-like insect that was perched on his arm and took a chunk out of his hand, and he woke up. And what he came to discover is that a mosquito had bitten him on his hand right there in his sleep. And that sensation came through and formed itself into this giant, the tiny bite, and the itching transformed itself, magnified itself into this image of this monstrosity tearing a chunk out of his flesh. So physical sensations experienced during sleep can definitely influence our dreams. If your feet are outside the covers and they're cold, you could have the dream experience you're walking on snow and your feet are cold. That said, going back to at least 2,000 years, to the time of let's see, was a guy by the name of Galen of Pergamon. He was a AD physician in the Roman Empire, or something like that. I'm pretty sure I'm horrible with names and dates, but which is funny. That's why I have a collected list of all my footnotes. I'd have to go back and reference it. But anyway, Galen of Pergamon, he used dream imagery to diagnose a physical to diagnose physical conditions.
Right.
So, and there was another more recent story where there was more recent, we're talking still a few hundred years ago, that a patient came to a doctor complaining, or during the discussion of dreams with a doctor, a patient reported having a dream of driving a team of sweating, panting horses up a hill. So you imagine he's, driving them, making them climb this hill. And they talked about some other stuff. And the doctor used that dream as a way to, as a clue that he needed to investigate the potential of a heart condition. And it turned out the guy did. The guy had a heart condition. His heart was laboring to push oxygen and blood around, thus the vision of panting, sweating horses. So I think there's a reciprocal or a connected relationship between these dreams. And very often, dreams can have content that might suggest to us physical conditions at the very least. And I would say, to get to your actual question, I think it probably could relate to mental health conditions as well. Certainly we have, and what I don't like to do too much. Okay. There's a lot of things I don't like to do in terms of things, I don't like, and things I think are wrong. One of them is like, since I'm not practicing private clinical licensed paid counseling and therapy on an ongoing basis with a client in a very specific, rigorous setting, I don't get into diagnoses with folks. Now, if they come to me and they say, hey, I've been diagnosed with, bipolar, borderline personality, okay, we can talk about that. Your understanding of your own diagnosis is definitely going to be a part of your self-concept and how that expresses itself in dreams. But in terms of undiagnosed conditions, I definitely don't go to the labels or diagnoses place myself. I don't, even if I have a suspicion that something might be, I just keep it to myself because I can't say that definitively, and I don't want to give someone the wrong idea. And I don't want that to become the focus either, because, a lot of folks may not really be aware of how mental health conditions work. It's like, if I were to tell you there's an object and that object has a trunk and branches and leaves, and it draws, it does photosynthesis from the sun, and it drinks water, and it's about 50 feet tall, you'd probably say, well, that's a tree, isn't it? I'd say that's how mental health diagnoses work. You get an intense period of low mood, lack of energy, suicidal thoughts. You start getting all these little things together and you go, how long has this been going on? More than 2 weeks? That sounds like depression. It's like, that's kind of how these things work. So what I would do in terms of a dream interpretation experience is, I'm not going to look at, I think you have depression, let me tell you all about it. I would go and, these elements of the dream say, it looks like you're worried about a particular type of situation. And here's how you've been handling it in the past. And here's how this next part of the dream leads us to think maybe you want to try something different. Okay, now we got all that. Has there been something holding you back? And then we start looking at, so I look at more the discrete symptoms maybe someone might have, and just talk about those things. You got anxiety, you got fears, you got obsessions. You can't let go of something. You're focused in on it. It's driving you crazy. It's like, maybe if we look at it, we can dissipate that obsession a little bit. And then we don't have to get into, I think you have OCD. It doesn't matter. You might, but it's not something I can actually handle, or certainly not as carefully as one should. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you have a hard out here coming up. And before we leave,
In a bit, yeah.
my producer is going to kill me if I don't. She has a dream that she would like you
Oh,
to interpret if
yeah.
you don't mind. Would you be willing to do
Oh,
that?
hell yeah. Let's do this. I've never tried to do it like live before. You're willing to do it. I'm game.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my producer, Mackenzie Fritsch.
Hello and welcome.
Hello. Just figuring out how to unmute my mic.
There you go. I wasn't sure if you were talking or if I couldn't hear you.
Oh,
Good deal. Well, normal process is I just shut up and listen. You tell me the dream beginning to end like a story, and then we see what we can do with it.
well, I've got dreams. I'm one of those people who dreams a lot and remembers a lot. And so I think I'll talk to you about coming onto your show where we have more time to talk about dreams.
Sure. Yeah. I would be, the more time we have to talk, the better an answer and understanding we're going to get. I've gone as short as 45 minutes for a dream. I've gone as long as 4.5 hours with one person. So I would be happy to have you on. I mean, we don't have to do it right now.
Well, today I just have something simple.
Sure.
I'm not looking for meaning in it. It's just a dream I had recently that I find particularly more funny than anything.
Okay.
But I didn't know if you may have some insight about it. But first, I have a lot of curiosity about dreaming, a lot of questions, and you've answered a lot of them in this very short interview. But one very important and pressing question that I just have to ask is how come I can urinate in a dream and it's not actually happening in real life?
Yeah.
Is there an answer to that?
There is, or at least a biological theory that accounts for it. I've had those experiences too. I actually shocked myself awake by having the semi-lucid sensation or experience of letting my bowels release and realizing I'm still in bed. And I hadn't actually peed the bed. It did not happen, but I had that experience and I was terrified. It shocked me awake. I'm like, oh no. So this gets into the idea of somnambulism and basically just somnus, sleeping, ambulism, sleepwalking, literally. And it covers it, sleep talking, sleep laughing, all of that type of stuff. So there's a biological switch that gets thrown when we become unconscious, and it's the same. It appears to be the same switch that puts our breathing on automatic, and it's actually related to sleep paralysis and the experience of demons sitting on the chest. So this is all related. So what happens when we become unconscious is that switch kind of gets thrown for 99% of people, and that keeps us from acting out our dreams in the physical world. And then for some folks, that switch does not get thrown, and we're not even sure why. There's some medication that seems to decrease that incidence of having that experience.
Well, like in children who still wet the bed regularly. For that particular aspect of the switch being flipped. I guess maybe the switch hasn't developed yet. Children are also they move around a lot while they're sleeping.
Yeah, tend to roll around. It may be much more shallow sleepers in that sense. I think there is what's the way to put it? The experience of, say, childhood enuresis, it is covered as a sleep disorders because it occurs during sleep, but it's technically different. It's not like the child is having a dream about peeing and therefore does. It's just that the bladder control in sleep isn't quite there, and it just happens. And this is one of those medical mysteries too, is like there's a lot of theories about it, but we actually don't know exactly why. Let's say you're potty trained and you could hold it during the day. You don't no longer soak your drawers or your diaper, but then when you get into sleep, that fails. And it's not like you never learned, it just goes away, but only for some people and only for a period of time. It's most common in children of a certain age, and then it stops. And it's like I said, there's a lot of theories out there as to why that happens, but there are competing theories where it's like, well, this might be the reason and this might be the reason, and that's why there's different approaches to it. And the idea of So there's actually the reverse of somnambulism or sleepwalking, which is sleep paralysis. So normally you go to sleep and the switch is flipped and your thought process, your sensation, internal experience of movement is not translated to your physical body. On the opposite side of it is your brain is awake and your body's still asleep. That switch is thrown when you're conscious. You haven't come out of sleep enough. You've come out of it enough to be aware that you're awake, but not enough to move your body. And that's where people feel, this is my theory and others, but the one I believe is that the reason you have this sensation of something sitting on your chest is because your breathing is still on automatic. And you're not able to take a voluntary breath because you can't, because that connection isn't there. So people have that experience of, I can't breathe. I can't take a breath because you can't breathe intentionally. You can only breathe automatically. So they get that experience of that sleep paralysis. In that moment of sleep paralysis, the idea that something's on their chest and they can't inhale.
I've also heard the theory that people who feel like they've been abducted by aliens might have been experiencing sleep paralysis.
Sure. There are experiences that, I mean, that could be very easily accounted for or by very vivid dreams that for some reason the mind does not perceive as dreams. And that's a controversial area too, because you get into the idea of telling someone their experience of reality is not what they think it is, which I hesitate to do that, but it is a theory that, that we may, what am I trying to say? We may have experiences we don't accurately recognize for what they are. And that does happen to us quite frequently, but then applying, just because it can happen doesn't mean it is the case in this type of circumstance or every circumstance of that type. So, one of the few dreams I remember like a handful, one that I remember from very young. And all I can say is I have a memory that this was a dream that I had when I was still sleeping, 2 or 3 years old, sleeping in a child bed with rails on the side. So you don't climb out or fall out. The idea that I remember my giant, as big as I was, Wile E. Coyote stuffed animal got up and flew around the room, just levitated and flew around the room and out the window. And then I levitated around the room and out the window. And I have no other memory. Now, was I abducted by aliens? Is that even a real memory? Did I actually have that experience, whether it was a dream or not? I can't tell you, but if I had to give it a 60-40 chance of that was an actual experience I had, whether it was a dream or not, I think it was. But then was it a dream or was it more? And if it was an alien abduction, I'm okay never knowing. I'm okay with that. I hope they don't come back.
That butt probing sounds brutal.
Yeah. I mean, at least buy me flowers, ask permission, that kind of thing.
Dinner.
There was a great I think it was a Joe Rogan episode recently where they were talking about that. They were talking about the idea of, the aliens, they got us all wrong. All they got to do is offer the opportunity to be abducted and probed. And there'd be people like, oh, me, let's go. Like they'll get volunteers. They'll get volunteers for sure. Not me, but somebody will.
Make an app.
For sure.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Register here. Come and get me.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so this dream that I had recently, there was I was on a trip with my nephew, and there was an understanding, although we never left our domain in the dream. There was an understanding that I was in Taiwan on this mountain where I lived as a child. And so we were in an Airbnb. It seemed very much like the apartment that I lived in when I was actually living in Taiwan, but we knew this was an Airbnb, and we had this feeling, I don't know where this came from in the dream, that the owner of the Airbnb was a serial killer, and we were going to be killed. And so my nephew was Googling on his phone to try to determine if we were going to be killed or not, because that's how it's done. And I decided to take a nap, which is another appropriate thing to do in that situation. I'm often very sleepy in my dreams. So I am in bed, and the caretaker, or who is understood to be, he doesn't walk in the door and say, "Hi, I am the caretaker of this Airbnb." But a man comes in who is understood to be the caretaker of the Airbnb. In not the owner. I get this might come from my own experience with Airbnbs, but and traveling to other countries. But quite frequently, the domicile is owned by somebody in Europe or United States. They're not on premises, but they have hired a local who maintains, and you communicate with the person who is signed into the website, and then they pass a message on to their caretaker. Oh, the heater is broken, things like that. Okay. So our understanding is that the owner is the serial killer. We don't have any fear of the caretaker. He comes in with a couple of sacks that are moving around and obviously contain animals. And he hands me one of these sacks and says, "Here, I brought this for you." And I reach right into the sack with this, and again, an understanding that nobody is going to give me a sack and say, "Here, this is for you," if it has something dangerous inside, which is in direct contradiction to the idea that the owner wants to kill us. But so I reach in, and what I pull out is a caiman crocodile. I call it a crocodile in the dream, but it couldn't have been. And so it's this small, teenage-sized crocodile, which promptly bites me, and which is painful in the dream. So I don't know, mosquitoes. And bitten or not, I'm quite thrilled by this crocodile. And then the other bag that he has turns out to contain just a myriad of snakes. Basically dump it out onto my bed, and it's all these snakes, and I'm pretty happy about that as well. But I'm concerned because I see that because I'm assuming he's caught these snakes in the area for me, and there's a boa constrictor amongst them, and my thought is, wait a minute, boa constrictors are like indigenous to Brazil, Central America. They're not going to be here in Asia. So what's going on here? But that's all I remember. That's all that I know about the dream.
Okay, that is more than enough to work with. That is longer than some dreams that get brought to me. We had one. I mean, not to go too far off topic. We're going to get to you. This gal, the only thing she could remember was the sensation of falling through a void. And that's what we talked about. And we yeah. So you've got a lot of things going on there. You've got from the way you've talked about it, you travel in real life, and so you've got a representation of travel in the dream. You've got the rental of an Airbnb, which you've probably done in real life. You've got an association with this place that reminds you of someplace you actually lived as a child. So there's that connection. Very interesting that you've got a character in the dream that is not present, never seen, but represents an unseen danger. And it's actually the owner of the building, and that they're specifically a serial killer. So we'd probably, if we had more time, we'd probably focus on that a little bit and say, what is it about this space that you're in, being connected to your childhood in a way that is, it's owned by a dangerous person who's an unseen danger. Specifically of the serial killers. So they're it's not a you think they mean to hurt you. They hurt everybody. They're a killer that kills to kill for the sake of killing, and they've killed multiple people in a serial manner. So this is a very specific type of danger, and that they own the space, and but that that they're remote in that sense of, like, you never see them, and you get the sense that they don't even live in the country maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if I had that sense in the dream, just in my real experiences.
Fair enough.
I mean,
that's
I
good.
think
That's why we talk about it. Yeah.
That the owner was, somewhere that the owner could pop up.
Okay, so that the person may actually be close enough to be a threat, and then that's where the nephew was looking on the internet. And again, this is as I was talking with Sean at the beginning, the idea of if you had a friend in the dream, but it's not a friend you knew, it more the concept of friendship. And this one, you have a specific family member, and someone who was conducting, say, research, Googling. So this may be there's a suggestion of something of a information pipeline that you know this particular young relative, you may consider them an authority in a certain way that you're not. Maybe because they're a member of a younger generation, you think they have more technological know-how, and so you've asked them, how do you fix this stupid phone or whatever? I mean, does that sound like an experience relative to your life?
Yeah, that could apply. I mean, I can see why the younger person of the party would be the first to pull out the phone and be like, oh, well, let's see if he's a serial killer.
Yeah, and there's very much a representation of like a effective problem solving methodology, a person who represents someone who's able to solve problems in a particular way, and you brought them with you on this journey, on this vacation, on this experience into somewhere else. And the way you talked about it, while he's Googling, you went to take a nap, and that might be, you mentioned the idea of having been having a recurring theme, perhaps in your dreams, of being tired, of needing sleep. Do you find yourself, exhausted in daily life, or underslept, or overly tired physically?
I'm often very tired, and I don't sleep very well.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that might be another theme you're bringing in from your real life. Well, maybe it sounds like it is, but the idea that in the middle of when you're not able to contribute to the problem solving process, you're like, well, look, I'll just take a nap real quick so I can maybe account for the fact that I'm tired, or be fresh when I'm needed. Like if I can't be helpful now, I'll do something else, something more productive, which for you at that moment was, let me just go lay down. Let me just take care of this tired problem. And then I'll be able to get back. I'll come, let me know when you need me. And then this caretaker shows up, and you did not sense a feeling of threat from them. So it's very interesting. So the owner of the house is the serial killer threat. The immediate caretaker of the house. So there's a difference between like a possession and a maintenance element going on here. This is where my brain goes with these things. Stop me if I'm trying to condense a lot of this, and I'm not asking very many questions. But stop me if I'm ever wrong, or like you did corrected me earlier. If if I didn't hear you correctly, or if I'm like you're going down, I don't think that's the right angle. Fine, I'll rattle a different doorknob. Yeah, but anyway, and a lot of this stuff we just put a pin in and say we're not sure what to do with that. But there's, why wouldn't the owner and the caretaker be the same person? There's a reason for that. I like to go with counterfactuals too. And it wasn't that the owner sent the caretaker. It's something to do with the caretaker himself bringing these things in. And you did mention the idea of being thrilled. Were you being sarcastic, or you were actually happy?
Yeah, it seemed like the caretaker knew that I would enjoy these animals, and was doing a kindness by saying, "Hey, here, okay. I found these. I got like this."
I got that feeling talking to you that actually you do appreciate reptiles, snakes.
Oh, I love them.
Crocodiles. There you go. So he did bring you something positive, not a negative thing. This wasn't an accidental threat,
a scary thing. Or
yeah. So you've got a juvenile croc. You reach into one, you're like, well, let's see what's in the bag, and you pull out, and it was something you wanted to see, even though it bit you. So we would probably spend more time talking about the idea of, well, what do you make of the experience that you're getting something you want, and it is thrilling. Oh, it's the cutest of the cutie little boys, the juvenile crocs, but it bit you. So they're, a hobby, the metaphor of careful, it'll bite you in the ass, that kind of thing. So something might be going on there where you're getting an infliction of representation of a physical harm or representation of something else expressed as a physical harm from something you enjoy. And that the other bag gets dumped on the bed and it's snakes, and you love snakes too, but one of them's a boa, and it's like, this is out of place. Something out of place stood out to you. So in a bag full of things you would otherwise enjoy, is like, even though I like it, this still doesn't belong here. There's something that doesn't belong.
In some instances, when something like that would happen, that would be when I would tell myself, "Oh, you're dreaming. This isn't real."
Okay, you can have that experience.
This dream, but there are times when a dream. Oh, I mean, all dreams are absolutely crazy, so this should happen all the time. But there are times when I will say, "Oh, this isn't making sense. Oh, okay, I'm just dreaming right now."
Sure. There's an interesting phenomenon with some folks. I think you're representative of the kind where the absurdity of a dream shocks them out of the dream experience. And that seems to be more common. Do you have any lucid dreaming ability? Like once you realize there you go. Yep. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. I've never had that. Like my dreams are, I'm in it and it's all real. And I've never had that experience of, oh, I'm dreaming. Never had that. It's very interesting. What I did want to say was, having gone through it a second time and kind of had me read it back to you and give some of my thoughts, did anything occur to you during that? Like, did any themes start coming together in terms of explanatory of the process, the narrative that's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there could be all kinds of underlying things in there, I suppose.
Sure. Well, if nothing jumps out at you,
some of it would be realizing. I mean, I had this dream several weeks ago.
That was my next question too. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing what was going on at that time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So what might we relate it to? I mean, can you remember?
I just don't know what was going on at that time.
You don't remember what was going on at all. Fair enough. Yeah.
And we got to wrap up now too, because we have another show coming on the radio.
Oh, that's
I'm going to pull Sean back in to say goodbye. But I'll look into see what it is involved with coming on your show so we can actually talk more.
I'd love to do it. Happy to have you. Thanks for talking to me.
Hey, John.
Hello. Okay, folks. Back. Well, that is our show. Benjamin, where can people find you?
I am all across every possible social media, either, Wizard Benjamin or Benjamin the Dream Wizard, one of those two, at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, Benjamin the Dream Wizard on YouTube, all kinds of things there. My books are on Amazon, but the benjaminthedreamwizard.com is kind of the one-stop shop for everything. That's where all the links are. There's a contact page. If you want to contact me that way, you can get a hold of me on social media and whatnot. So that's usually the best way right there.
Great. And we have it right here on the screen. And I believe it's in the description down below as well. Benjamin, I thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fascinating. I could talk to you for hours. There's so many questions that I have. So best of luck with your writing. Best of luck with your podcast. And be eager to see Mackenzie come on your show. And
yes,
for everyone else, next week, we're going to be diving into right-wing extremism. Yay. Always fun. See you next Tuesday. Benjamin, thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate your time.
And this has been Coup.